On March 20, 2003, the United States, alongside coalition forces, launched a military invasion of Iraq. This marked the beginning of a significant and controversial chapter in modern history, one that would have far-reaching implications for years to come. This marked the beginning of a long and costly conflict. The initial phase of the invasion saw intense combat and widespread destruction, as coalition forces advanced rapidly through Iraqi territory. The invasion was predicated on the belief that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and harbored ties to terrorist organizations. These claims were used to justify the military action, despite significant skepticism and opposition from various quarters. The Bush administration argued that these factors posed a significant threat to the United States and its allies. They maintained that preemptive action was necessary to ensure global security and prevent potential attacks. The invasion was met with mixed reactions from the international community. While some nations supported the US-led intervention, others vehemently opposed it, citing concerns over legality and the potential for long-term instability. Some countries supported the US-led intervention, while others condemned it as a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. The global debate over the invasion highlighted deep divisions and differing perspectives on international law and military intervention. Domestically, the decision to invade Iraq was highly controversial. The American public was deeply divided, with passionate arguments both for and against the war dominating the national discourse. Public opinion was sharply divided along partisan lines. Supporters of the invasion believed it was a necessary step to combat terrorism and promote democracy, while opponents viewed it as an unjust and costly endeavor. Despite the controversies, the invasion itself was swift. Coalition forces quickly advanced through Iraq, encountering pockets of resistance but ultimately overwhelming the Iraqi military. Coalition forces quickly overwhelmed the Iraqi military and toppled Saddam Hussein's regime. The fall of Baghdad was a symbolic moment, signaling the end of an era and the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter for Iraq. However, the rapid victory proved to be deceptive. The initial success of the invasion gave way to a protracted and bloody insurgency, as various factions within Iraq began to vie for power and influence. The fall of Baghdad did not mark the end of the war. Instead, it ushered in a new phase of conflict, characterized by guerrilla warfare, sectarian violence, and a growing humanitarian crisis. Instead, it ushered in a new phase of conflict, one characterized by insurgency, sectarian violence, and a protracted U.S. military presence. The situation on the ground became increasingly complex and volatile, with no clear end in sight. The invasion of Iraq remains a deeply polarizing event. It has sparked endless debates among politicians, scholars, and the public, with opinions varying widely on its justification and outcomes. Its legacy continues to shape the political landscape both in the United States and in the Middle East. The war has had profound and lasting effects on international relations, regional stability, and the lives of countless individuals. The long-term consequences of the invasion, including the rise of sectarian violence and the destabilization of the region, continue to be debated and analyzed. The impact of the Iraq War is still felt today, as the world grapples with the ongoing challenges it has created. By 2007, the situation in Iraq had deteriorated significantly. The streets of Baghdad and other major cities were scenes of chaos and destruction, with buildings reduced to rubble and daily life disrupted by violence. The country was engulfed in a brutal sectarian conflict. Sunni and Shiite factions were locked in a deadly struggle for power, with civilians often caught in the crossfire, leading to a humanitarian crisis. Sunni insurgents, including Al-Qaeda in Iraq, were carrying out deadly attacks against Shiite civilians and Iraqi security forces. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings became a grim daily reality. The U.S. military found itself increasingly drawn into this sectarian violence. American soldiers were not only fighting insurgents but also trying to maintain order and protect civilians amidst the chaos. Faced with a deteriorating security situation, the Bush administration announced a new strategy in January 2007, the Surge. This was a bold and controversial move aimed at stabilizing the country. This involved deploying an additional 20,000 U.S. troops to Iraq, primarily to Baghdad and Anbar province. The goal was to quell the violence and create a more secure environment for political progress. The surge was a gamble. It required meticulous planning and coordination, with the hope that increased military presence would turn the tide in favor of stability. It represented a significant escalation of U.S. military commitment at a time when public support for the war was waning. Protests and demonstrations against the war were becoming more frequent back home, and morale among soldiers was low. The surge, combined with a change in counterinsurgency tactics, had a significant impact on the security situation in Iraq. U.S. forces, working more closely with Iraqi partners, were able to reduce violence in key areas. U.S. forces working more closely with Iraqi partners were able to reduce violence in key areas. This collaboration was crucial in regaining control over volatile regions. The Anbar awakening, in which Sunni tribes turned against al-Qaeda in Iraq, was a major turning point. This local movement significantly weakened the insurgency and bolstered the efforts of U.S. and Iraqi forces. Despite the success of the surge in reducing violence, it did not resolve the underlying political and sectarian tensions in Iraq. Political leaders continued to struggle with deep-seated divisions and mistrust. These tensions would continue to simmer beneath the surface, threatening to erupt once again. The fragile peace was always at risk of being shattered by unresolved grievances and power struggles. The surge bought time for a political solution, but ultimately, it was up to the Iraqis to find a lasting peace. The international community watched closely, hoping for a breakthrough that would bring enduring stability to the region. In 2008, the United States and Iraq signed the Status of Forces Agreement. This agreement established a timeline for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq. Under the SOFA, all U.S. combat troops were to be withdrawn by the end of 2011. The withdrawal of U.S. troops was a gradual process, carried out in phases. As U.S. forces drew down, Iraqi security forces assumed greater responsibility for the country's security. The Obama administration, which took office in 2009, was committed to ending the U.S. combat mission in Iraq. The withdrawal of U.S. troops was completed in December 2011. This marked the end of the U.S. combat mission in Iraq. However, the United States maintained a diplomatic presence in Iraq, and a small number of U.S. troops remained in the country to provide training and support to Iraqi forces. The withdrawal of U.S. troops was a significant milestone in the Iraq War. It marked the end of a long and costly conflict that had deeply divided the United States. However, the withdrawal did not mean that the United States was disengaging from Iraq. The U.S. continued to have a significant stake in Iraq's future stability. Section 4. The Rise and Fall of ISIL. A new threat emerges. In the wake of the U.S. withdrawal, Iraq faced a resurgent insurgency. The power vacuum left by the departing American forces created an environment ripe for conflict and instability. Various militant groups began to vie for control, leading to a period of intense violence and uncertainty for the Iraqi people. This time, the threat came from the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, a brutal jihadist group that emerged from the chaos of the Syrian civil war. ISIL's origins can be traced back to the early 2000s, but it was the Syrian conflict that provided the fertile ground for its rapid expansion and transformation into a formidable force. ISIL exploited sectarian tensions and weaknesses in the Iraqi security forces to seize control of large swaths of territory in northern and western Iraq, including the city of Mosul, in 2014. The group's ability to capitalize on local grievances and its ruthless tactics allowed it to quickly gain a foothold in the region. The rapid advance of ISIL caught the Iraqi government and the international community off guard. The speed and scale of ISIL's territorial gains were unprecedented, leading to widespread panic and a desperate scramble to mount an effective response. ISIL's brutality, including its persecution of religious minorities and its use of social media to spread its propaganda, shocked the world. The group's sophisticated media strategy was designed to instill fear, recruit fighters, and project an image of invincibility. The group's territorial gains and its declaration of a caliphate spanning Iraq and Syria posed a significant threat to regional stability. Neighboring countries were alarmed by the prospect of a powerful jihadist state on their borders, leading to increased military and diplomatic efforts to contain the threat. In response to the ISIL threat, the United States launched Operation Inherent Resolve in 2014. This operation marked the beginning of a sustained military campaign aimed at dismantling ISIL's capabilities and reclaiming lost territory. This was a multinational effort aimed at degrading and ultimately defeating ISIL. The coalition brought together a diverse array of countries, each contributing resources and expertise to the fight against the jihadist group. The US-led coalition provided air support and training to Iraqi security forces, and Kurdish Peshmerga fighters. These efforts were crucial in building the capacity of local forces to take on ISIL on the ground. The coalition also conducted airstrikes against ISIL targets in Syria. These strikes targeted key infrastructure, command centers, and supply lines, significantly weakening ISIL's operational capabilities. After years of fighting, ISIL was territorially defeated in Iraq in 2017 and in Syria in 2019. The liberation of key cities and the collapse of ISIL's territorial control marked a turning point in the battle against the group. The group's defeat was a major victory for the US-led coalition and its local partners. The successful campaign demonstrated the effectiveness of international cooperation in addressing complex security challenges. However, ISIL continued to pose a threat as an insurgency, carrying out sporadic attacks in both Iraq and Syria. The remnants of the group adapted to the new reality, shifting their tactics to guerrilla warfare and continuing to exploit local vulnerabilities. Section 5. A change in strategy transitioning to an advisory role. With the territorial defeat of ISIL, the nature of the U.S. military presence in Iraq began to shift. In 2021, the United States formally ended its combat mission in Iraq. This marked a transition to a primarily advisory role for U.S. forces. The Biden administration emphasized that the U.S. military presence in Iraq would focus on training, advising, and assisting Iraqi security forces in their fight against the remnants of ISIL. The U.S. also committed to continuing to provide air support and intelligence sharing to its Iraqi partners. The transition to an advisory role reflected the changing nature of the U.S. relationship with Iraq. The U.S. was no longer engaged in direct combat operations. Instead, it was focused on supporting the Iraqi government in its efforts to provide security and stability to the country. This shift in strategy was not without its challenges. The U.S. military presence in Iraq remained controversial, with some Iraqi political factions calling for the complete withdrawal of all foreign troops. The U.S. also had to navigate complex relationships with various Iraqi actors, including the Iraqi government, the Kurdish regional government, and Iranian-backed militias.